My best friend's mother. Waited at the door after dinner. Then said, "Come inside for a minute." My truck keys were already in my hand when the front door opened behind me. "Jasper," Vivian called. I turned beneath the brass porch light. Rain swept across the cedar steps in a silver sheet, and Vivian Parker stood in the doorway with a manila envelope pressed against her sweater. One corner had been crushed beneath her fingers. "Come inside for a minute." The words were quiet, but not casual. I stepped back under the porch roof and wiped my boots on the mat. Warm air rolled over me as I crossed the threshold, carrying cinnamon, dark coffee, and the faint wood smoke from the fireplace. Owen had left 20 minutes earlier for his night shift at the lumberyard. The dinner plates were still stacked beside the sink. Vivian closed the door against the rain. "Is something wrong with Owen?" I asked. "No." She looked at the envelope instead of me. "It's the bakery." She led me into the living room. A fire snapped behind the iron screen, throwing amber light across the bookshelves and the old framed photographs on the mantel. I remained near the edge of the rug while she placed the envelope on the coffee table and removed a thick set of documents. The top page bore the city seal and a red structural hazard stamp. "The building inspector came this afternoon," she said. "A complaint was filed about the main floor. They opened part of the basement ceiling and found a shear crack in the center girder." "How long do you have?" 14 days to submit an engineered repair plan. If the temporary stabilization is not installed within 48 hours, the bakery has to close. If the final repair is not approved by the end of the 2 weeks, the city can condemn the building." She passed me the report. The bakery had stood on Bellwether Street for 93 years. Vivian owned the business in the brick building beneath it, but the mortgage contained a safety default clause. A condemnation order would let the lender demand immediate repayment. She would lose the shop before an appeal could reach a hearing. "Have you called structural firms?" 4. 2 will not work on a registered historic building. 1 cannot start for 6 weeks. The last said the ovens and the entire shop floor have to be removed before they will even inspect the beam. "And insurance?" "It covers an approved repair. It does not cover demolition that the insurer considers avoidable, and it does not replace the income after a condemnation closure." A second paper lay beneath the notice. It was a purchase offer from Bennett Development. The date matched the day of the complaint. Mr. Bennett owned the apartment complex next door and had tried to buy Vivian's property 3 times in the past year. His latest plan showed a parking structure extending across the bakery lot. He sent this before the inspector left. Vivian said, "If the city closes me, the mortgage clause gives him the opening he's been waiting for." I studied the attached engineer's sketch. The proposed solution required dismantling the ovens, removing the century-old tile, and rebuilding most of the shop floor. The cost estimate was large enough to end the business even if the building survived. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Her eyes lifted to mine. "I need to know whether they are right." I had known Owen since trade school. His mother had fed us when our apprentice wages barely covered rent, let us repair furniture in her garage, and treated my work as a craft long before anyone else did. But gratitude was not a structural calculation. "I can inspect the timber tonight," I said. "I can recommend emergency shoring if it is needed. A licensed structural engineer must approve the load plan and seal the final drawings." "I understand. If the damage can be repaired without lifting the shop floor, I will tell you. If it cannot, I will tell you that too." "That is why I asked you." Her answer settled something in the room. I folded the report and slid it back into the envelope. "Get your coat. We should see the beam before the bakery opens tomorrow." The rain followed us all the way to Bellwether Street. The bakery occupied the ground floor of a narrow brick building with tall front windows and carved wooden trim. Even closed, it smelled faintly of yeast and sugar. Vivian unlocked the side door and switched on the service lights. We crossed the dark kitchen between silent mixers and steel preparation tables. The ovens sat over the center of the basement, exactly where the report said the girder had failed. The basement stairs complained beneath our weight. At the bottom, limestone walls held the damp chill of the earth. My flashlight cut across flour dust, copper pipes, and a line of old timber posts. The main girder ran beneath the oven room. The damage was impossible to miss. A 6-foot crack followed the grain of the Douglas fir beam. At the center span, the timber had dropped nearly half an inch. Fresh splinters clung to the lower edge, and 2 floor joists above had begun to shift toward the opening. Vivienne remained on the last stair. Is it going to collapse? Not tonight if the ovens stay cold and no one enters the kitchen above. But the report is right about one thing. The load has to come off this beam immediately. Her hand tightened around the railing. I measured the span, checked the foundation pockets at both ends, and examined the masonry for movement. The walls were sound. The beam was failing along the grain, but enough original timber remained to preserve the historic fabric if a new member carried the load. I think the floor can stay, I said. Vivienne descended 1 step. How? We install temporary shoring under the joists, lift only enough to return the floor to level, then sister the old girder with a steel-flitched white oak beam. The oak carries compression, the steel controls tension. We keep the old timber in place and preserve the floor above. Can it be done in 2 weeks? If the engineer approves the numbers and the city grants the emergency stabilization permit. She searched my face. And if they do? My truck will be here at 6 in the morning. The next hour went to photographs, measurements, and notes. I did not touch the damaged beam again until I had marked the safe zones and closed the basement with a temporary barrier. Upstairs, Vivienne stood beside the dark display cases. What happens tomorrow? You close the bakery until the shoring is installed. Her expression tightened. I have 78 custom orders this week. Then Owen needs to find another licensed kitchen for production. No one works above that beam. She nodded before the disappointment could become an argument. I'll call him. I will call Maya Chen. She is a structural engineer who has reviewed historic timber work for me before. If she is available, she can inspect at dawn. Vivienne reached for her checkbook. I need your rate before you begin. I will send you a written estimate tonight. Maya invoices separately. Materials require approval before purchase. You will not owe me anything that is not on paper. The checkbook remained in her hand for a moment, then closed. Thank you. Do not thank me until the floor is standing. She looked toward the basement door. It is still standing because you came tonight. I carried my tools back to the truck before that sentence could settle too deeply. At 5:40 the next morning, Owen met me in the alley behind the bakery with 2 travel mugs and a face that had not slept. My mother said you think the floor can stay. I think it can. Maya decides whether the numbers agree. He handed me a coffee. Then make the numbers agree. That is not how engineering works. It was worth trying. The side door opened. Vivienne came out wearing work trousers, boots, and a closed wool cardigan. A clipboard rested beneath one arm. I have moved this week's orders to St. Luke's Community Kitchen, she said. Their board approved temporary use until Sunday. Owen arranged the mixers and transport. Owen lifted his cup. I am useful before sunrise. Occasionally, I said. Vivienne almost smiled. Maya arrived at 6 in a compact car filled with rolled plans, survey equipment, and the kind of organized calm that made clients tell the truth. She inspected the basement, reviewed my measurements, and spent nearly an hour tracing the load path from the ovens to the foundation. The repair concept is sound, she said at last, but the temporary shoring has to be installed before noon tomorrow, and the ovens remain off until the final sign-off. She marked the locations for 4 cribbing towers and specified the jack capacities. I can seal a stabilization plan by 3 this afternoon, she continued. The permanent beam calculation will take another day. I need material certificates for the oak and steel. I have reclaimed white oak in my shop with full provenance and moisture records, I said. Reclaimed does not mean approved. It means I kept the records because I knew you would ask. Maya gave me a brief nod. Vivienne looked between us. Will the city accept emergency shoring before the final repair permit? If the temporary plan is sealed and the inspector confirms the site conditions, Maya said. But no permanent work begins until the permit is issued. Then we do it in that order. Vivienne wrote the sequence on her clipboard. By 8, she had called every employee, transferred the active orders, and posted a temporary closure notice that explained only what customers needed to know. She did not blame the city or mention Bennett. She gave a reopening estimate, a phone number for order questions, and directions to the community kitchen. The first public pressure arrived before breakfast. A local business blogger posted a photograph of the closure notice with the caption, "Historic bakery may be unsafe." Customers began calling. One wedding client threatened to cancel. An employee asked whether she should find another job. Vivian answered each call from the front counter while Owen loaded ingredients into his truck. "We are completing an approved structural repair," she repeated. "Your order will be ready. If we cannot meet the promised date, you will receive a full refund." She did not promise what she could not control. By 10, the calls had slowed. I brought in the first cribbing blocks. The basement changed quickly once the work began. For the emergency filing today. What can stop us? Parts, approval, time. Only 3 things? 4, sleep. That one already left. She rubbed her eyes, then handed me a folder. Inside were the building plans, the service history, the inspector's notice, and a printed copy of Marcus Thorne's latest offer. "You organized all this before dawn?" "I organized it while you were measuring the cabinet." The plans showed every feeder, tenant meter, boiler circuit, and alarm connection. Elena had marked the vulnerable tenants in blue and the systems that needed temporary power in red. "You did half my coordination work." I refused to be the person standing beside a crisis asking when someone else will fix it. The answer stayed with me. At 10:30, Greg called back. "I found an 800-amp interior assembly removed from a hospital renovation. Same manufacturer family, complete documentation, tested before storage. Send the serial number." I already did. Priya reviewed the records while I built the load calculation. 20 minutes later, her reply arrived. Not approved. The bolt pattern matched, the voltage rating matched, the bus spacing did not. I stared at the message until the screen blurred. Elena approached from the lobby desk. "What happened?" "The assembly cannot be modified safely. We are back to nothing." She looked toward the tenants waiting near the elevator. Then she opened the building plans again. "The old laundry plant in the rear annex," she said. "It had its own service before my father converted the building. The equipment was removed, but I kept the demolition records." "Why?" "Because no one should throw away drawings of a building they still own." Before Elena could call Davis, a battery alarm sounded at the lobby desk. The temporary unit feeding the fire panel had dropped below reserve power while 9 tenants were still upstairs. I ran a cable from the protected construction circuit as Elena counted everyone twice. Mrs. Alvarez appeared last, carrying her medication and a small photograph of her husband. Elena wrapped her own scarf around the woman's shoulders and guided her to the hotel van. A boy from 3A handed me a folded drawing before leaving. Every window in the building glowed yellow, and a figure in heavy boots stood beside it. "Make it look like that again," he said. I slipped the drawing into my clipboard. "We will," Elena promised. She found a stamped equipment schedule from 12 years earlier. The rear service had used the same switchboard series as the current main. I sent the model number to Greg. He was silent for several seconds. "I know where one is." "Where?" "Municipal Archive Warehouse. We supplied it for a project that was canceled. It is new old stock, still boxed, but the city owns it." "Can they release it?" "Not through normal purchasing." Elena heard enough of the call to understand. "What would emergency release require?" Greg answered through the speaker. "A city property manager, the electrical inspector, and a purchase authorization before 4. Elena picked up the violation notice. "Inspector Davis's number is on this page." She called him herself. Davis did not sound pleased to hear from her, but he listened. Elena explained the equipment match, the deadline, and the hotel arrangements already made for tenants. She did not mention Marcus or accuse anyone of influence. "I am asking for a documented emergency transfer at fair value," she said. "Your office can inspect every component before installation." There was a pause. "Send me the model and the engineer's preliminary review," Davis said. If it matches, I will contact property management. Elena ended the call and looked at me. Next step? Priya confirms compatibility. Greg confirms the warehouse condition. You prepare the payment. She was already moving before I finished. By 3:15, the emergency release had been approved. Elena paid the city directly by certified funds. The invoice listed the exact equipment, the exact price, and the address where it would be installed. Nothing hidden. Nothing owed between us. Greg arrived at 5 with the boxed assembly, 2 licensed electricians from his emergency crew, and a paper bag full of sandwiches. He climbed out of the truck, looked up at the dark building, and pointed at me. You said this was a repair. It is. That cabinet weighs more than my first car. Your first car was poorly made. Elena laughed from the loading door. Greg glanced at her. She understands you? Not yet. I give it a week. I ignored him and checked the delivery documents. An hour after the equipment arrived, Davis called. A second anonymous complaint claimed we were installing unlisted gear without oversight. Elena put him on speaker while Greg photographed the seals and serial plates. The assembly came from municipal inventory, she said. Your office approved the transfer, and the engineer's letter is in the permit file. I have it, Davis replied. The complaint changes nothing. I am documenting the timing. Through the loading door glass, Marcus's black sedan idled across the alley. It pulled away when Elena raised her phone. She photographed the plate and sent it to her attorney with both complaint timestamps. It proved no crime, but the pattern was clear. Do you want to stop? I asked. She looked at the boxed switchgear. I want every bolt photographed, every receipt copied, and every inspection witnessed. Greg lifted his camera. Finally, a client who appreciates my best angle. Photograph the equipment, Greg. The utility disconnected the street service at 7 the next morning. Their crew locked the external switch and handed me the clearance confirmation. Only then did we open the main cabinet. For the next 14 hours, the basement became a controlled storm of work. We removed the damaged interior, labeled every feeder, cleaned the enclosure, and installed the approved assembly. Priya joined by video twice to review clearances and grounding details. Inspector Davis arrived at noon to verify the emergency permit number and the equipment documentation. He came alone. Marcus Thorne did not. By late afternoon, the first serious setback found us. One of the building's older feeder cables had heat damage farther back than the original inspection revealed. The insulation crumbled when Greg flexed it. We cannot reconnect that, he said. The replacement cable in the truck was 6 feet too short. The utility would not restore service with an unfinished feeder, and the supply warehouse closed in 40 minutes. I checked the route through the ceiling. If we move the junction point to the approved pull box near the boiler room, the cable reaches. Greg looked up. That adds 2 bends. Within limit? It also adds an hour. We have the hour. Elena appeared at the safety line with fresh coffee and 3 foil-wrapped meals. What happened? I showed her the damaged cable. Can you fix it? Yes, it costs time, not the building. She set the food down. Then eat for 5 minutes before you lose the ability to count. Greg took a sandwich immediately. Your landlady is smarter than you. She has lower standards for your concentration. Elena sat on the bottom step while we ate. She had changed into work trousers, boots, and a heavy sweater. A clipboard rested on her knee. All tenants are out, she said. The fire alarm company confirmed backup monitoring. Mrs. Alvarez reached her hotel. The family from 3A has the medical equipment outlet they requested. She checked each item as she spoke. You built a safer building before we restored a single light, I said. Her pen stopped. Then she marked the final box. So did you? We returned to work. By Thursday evening, 12 hours remained before the inspection. My shoulders burned from lifting cable. Copper dust had worked into every seam of my gloves. Greg's 2 electricians were terminating the tenant feeders while I finished the grounding system and checked torque values. A knock sounded at the basement door. Elena stood there with Marcus Thorne behind her. He wore a charcoal coat and an expression polished for boardrooms. I told him he could speak to me in the lobby. Elena said. He insisted the matter was urgent. It is, Marcus replied. My offer expires when the city arrives tomorrow. He remained outside the electrical room threshold. The locked safety gate stayed between him and the equipment. Elena folded her arms. You filed another complaint this afternoon. I informed the city that unapproved work might be underway. Inspector Davis had already documented the permit. Marcus either did not know that or hoped Elena did not. You are spending money you do not have, he continued. Even if the panel passes, the tenant credits and hotel bills will drain your reserve. Sell tonight and walk away without a foreclosure on your record. Elena took the purchase offer from his hand. For a moment, she studied the number. The basement had gone quiet except for the click of Greg's torque wrench and the low wind moving through the loading corridor. Then Elena tore the offer cleanly in half. You were right about one thing, she said. This building is expensive. Marcus's smile returned. But it is not yours. She placed the two halves back into his hand. The emergency permit is active. The equipment is city approved. Inspector Davis inspected the work at noon. If you enter this utility area again without permission, I will have you removed. Marcus looked through the gate at me. Your electrician will leave when the money does. Elena did not glance in my direction. My finances are documented, my tenants are protected, and my contractor will be paid in full. You no longer have a role here. The smile disappeared from his face. He turned and walked toward the stairs. Elena waited until the outer door closed. Her shoulders lowered, and one hand found the brick wall. I stepped toward the gate. You all right? She nodded, but her eyes shone under the work lights. He sent that offer before the inspector finished his first report, she said. He thought the deadline belonged to him. Tomorrow it belongs to Davis. A small breath escaped her, almost a laugh. She came through the gate after I opened it and stopped beside me. You did not speak for me. You did not need me to... No. Her fingers rested briefly against my sleeve, steadying herself more than reaching for me. Then she withdrew her hand and looked at the open cabinet. What is left? Final feeder terminations, insulation testing, then sleep if the building allows it. I will watch the lobby and keep the door locked. She carried an old wooden chair to the safety line and sat with her tenant clipboard. For the next 4 hours, while we tested circuits and closed steel covers, she remained in the basement. No one was alone with the deadline. At 2 a.m, Greg and his crew left to rest before the final test. I stayed to review every photograph, torque mark, test result, and permit document. Elena placed a mug beside my clipboard. You have read that page 4 times? 5. Did it improve? No. Then perhaps the 6th reading can wait until after you close your eyes. The inspection is at 8. The cot in your unit is 3 minutes away. I will call at 6. I looked at the finished cabinet. Every cover was secured. Every lockout record was complete. The tests had passed. For once, there was nothing useful left to do. At 6, I said. At 6. She kept the promise. Friday morning arrived cold and bright. The utility crew restored the street feed but left the main disconnect open until Davis approved energization. Tenants gathered behind the lobby barrier. Some held paper cups. The family from 3A had brought their children back from the hotel to watch. Davis reviewed Priya's sealed drawings, the emergency permit, the equipment transfer documents, and the test reports. He inspected the cabinet from top to bottom. Then he looked at me. Ready to energize? Yes. I put on my protective equipment and took hold of the main breaker. Across the safety line, Elena stood with her hands clasped around a ceramic mug. She met my eyes and nodded once. I closed the breaker. The sound cracked through the basement. For one long second, nothing happened. Then the overhead lights came on, bright, white, and steady. The boiler controls woke with a soft series of clicks. Pumps began turning. Somewhere above us, the old elevator chimed. The new switchboard settled into a smooth, even hum. No flicker. No burned plastic smell. Davis connected his instruments and checked the voltage, phase balance, neutral load, and ground fault system. 5 minutes felt longer than the previous 72 hours. At last, he signed the inspection form and fixed a green approval tag to the cabinet. "Passed," he said. "Submit the final as-built drawings by Wednesday." A cheer rose from the lobby. One of the children clapped both hands over his ears when the boiler started, then laughed as warm air moved through the vent above him. Elena closed her eyes. Steam curled from her coffee and vanished beneath the basement lights. When she opened them, she looked first at the green tag, then at me. "You saved the building," she said. "You kept it standing long enough for us to finish." Greg leaned toward one of his electricians. "They are going to argue over credit for the rest of their lives." Elena heard him. "Only if your invoice includes commentary." "It always does." The tension broke. Even Davis smiled before walking upstairs. The next 2 days were spent returning tenants to their apartments, checking heat in every unit, and documenting the final repairs. Elena paid the parts invoice, the hotel costs, Greg's crew, and my emergency labor bill from separate accounts. I signed the completion report only after the final payment cleared. The work ended cleanly. That evening, Elena and I made one last walk through the building. Warm air moved from the vents. Refrigerators hummed behind closed doors. On the 4th floor, she pressed her palm to the wall that had been hot 3 nights earlier. "Cold," she said. "Room temperature. Let me enjoy the word." I placed the boy's drawing beneath the clear cover of the maintenance log beside the green tag. Elena studied the yellow windows and the oversized figure in boots. "He made you taller. He understood perspective. He gave you arms longer than your body. Safety reach." Her laugh echoed through the hallway, then faded. "I spent 3 nights preparing to lose this place," she said. "Now everyone is home, and I do not know what to do with the quiet. Start with sleep. And after that, repair whatever does not have an inspection deadline." She nodded. "That may take longer. Most worthwhile work does." 1 week later, Elena asked me to attend a meeting in the lobby. Greg sat at the long table with Elena's building attorney. A maintenance services contract lay between them. This is a standing offer," the attorney said. "Your existing lease remains unchanged whether you accept or decline. The contract covers scheduled electrical maintenance and emergency response at market rates. You may have independent counsel review it." No one mentioned dinner, feelings, or the basement. I took the contract home. 3 days later, after an attorney from my union benefit program reviewed it, I signed. Elena signed last. "Welcome to the building team," she said, offering her hand across the table. "Thank you." We shook once, professionally. Greg waited until she left before leaning toward me. "You appear disappointed." "I am reading the insurance clause." "You have been on the same page for 4 minutes." I turned the page. Another week passed. The hallway light above 4B no longer flickered. Each evening when I returned from work, it cast a steady pool of gold across the runner rug. The air smelled of lemon polish instead of ozone. On Friday, Elena waited beside my apartment door. She carried no folder, no invoice, and no maintenance request. She wore a dark coat over a simple sweater, and her hair was loose from the wind outside. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "No." "Electrical?" "No." "Plumbing?" She smiled. "I am asking you to dinner." I looked down the hall. "As my landlady?" "No." "As a building client?" "No." Her smile softened, but her voice remained steady. "As Elena?" The answer came more easily than any permit application I had signed all month. "Yes." We walked to a small restaurant 3 blocks away. Halfway there, she glanced at the streetlights, then at me. "You are checking every transformer." "I am observing municipal infrastructure." "You nearly walked into a mailbox." "The mailbox was poorly placed." She laughed, and the sound followed us through the restaurant door. Dinner lasted 2 hours. We talked about the building before her father left it to her, the first factory where I learned to respect high voltage, the apartments she wanted to restore next, and the places I had lived without ever unpacking more than 1 box. There was no deadline waiting at the edge of the table. No one needed rescuing. At dinner, Elena told me why she had rejected Marcus's first offer, even when it would have erased every debt. His redevelopment clause allowed him to clear the building within 60 days. Mrs. Alvarez had lived there since the first loft opened. The family in 3A had arrived after a fire destroyed their former apartment. Elena could have started over, but everyone else would have been forced to start over with her. "What about you?" she asked. "You have worked in 6 states. Why stay in one old building?" I turned the coffee cup between my hands. Most of my apartments had contained a bed, a tool case, and boxes I never opened. "The first night I moved in, the boiler failed," I said. "Your father brought me a space heater and stayed until the room warmed. He acted as if I was already supposed to be there." "He did that for everyone." "You do too." Winter lights trembled outside the window. "I was afraid you stayed through the repair only because of duty," she said. "Duty ended when Davis signed the green tag." "And the contract?" "Work." "What is this?" I met her eyes, my choice. Her smile held no relief this time, only recognition. When we returned, several tenants were hanging winter lights in the lobby. Greg stood on a ladder pretending not to supervise. Elena stopped beneath the steady light outside 4B. "This is where I asked you to come inside," she said. "You had a dangerous panel. I also had terrible timing." "The timing was accurate. The panel was overheating." She shook her head. "Do you ever stop being an electrician?" "Occasionally." "When?" Elena reached for my hand. Her fingers closed around mine in full view of Greg, Mrs. Alvarez, and the family from 3A. The answer was warm against my palm. "Now," I said. Greg looked down from the ladder. "Should I document this as an after-hours service call?" Elena did not release my hand. "Only if you want your next invoice reviewed one line at a time." The tenants laughed. Above us, the hallway light remained steady. From the basement came the quiet, balanced hum of a system carrying exactly what it had been built to hold.